Sorry, I'm filling in for Ed Leonetti, so bear with me tonight. It's 6:30 p.m., September 14th, 2016. I'd like to call the meeting of the Urban Design Commission to order. Can I get a roll call, please?
Ms. Sullivan?
Here.
Mr. Winchester?
Here.
Ms. Ream?
Here.
Mr. Condon?
Here.
Mr. Miller?
Here.
Ms. Morse?
Here.
Mr. Sahil and Mr. Leonetti have been excused. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the first item on the agenda are the minutes. Can we get a motion to approve the minutes from July 13th? Looks like we have a motion by Commissioner Winchester and a second from Commissioner Miller. Are there any objections to the minutes? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. Okay, moving on to special order of business. I don't believe we have any disclosures. Do we have any disclosures tonight? Okay. So I think the second item on the special order of business is the Urban Design Commission maintenance and safety approval of 1% for art for Fire Station 9. I just asked for a motion to accept. Discussion. Staff, oh, sorry, staff, is there a presentation?
Madam Chair, Inzina Marari couldn't be here tonight. She teaches a class at UAA on Monday and Wednesday evenings. Sometimes she can be here on Wednesdays and other times not. Tonight she couldn't be here. So if there are any issues that I need to bring back to her, just let me know.
Okay, thank you. So on that note, may I have a motion to accept the 1% for art for Fire Station 9? It's been moved by Commissioner Winchester and seconded by Commissioner Condon. Are there any objections? No. Okay. So we've accepted the 1% for art. Looks like there's no items on the consent agenda tonight, nor unfinished business. We're going to move on to the regular agenda. Okay, so case 2016-0089, context-sensitive solutions transportation project site plan review. May we have a staff presentation?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Case 2016-0089, plans in hand review, O'Malley Road reconstruction, Phase 1, Seward Highway to Livingston Street, and Phase 2, Livingston Street to Hillside Drive. I'll read to you the goal for Phase 1. Reconstruct O'Malley Road from Seward Highway to Livingston Street, just east of Lake Otis Parkway. The project proposes to construct a 4-lane divided roadway with median openings and left turn lanes as appropriate, continuous illumination, 6 to 8 foot wide shoulders, signed and striped bike lanes, and separated multi-use paved 10-foot wide paths on both the north and south sides of the roadway. Phase 2 will consist of reconstruction of O'Malley Road from Livingston Street, just east of Lake Otis Parkway, to Hillside Drive, to include 3 lanes, which will consist of 2 12-foot lanes and a 14-foot two-way center left turn lane. Also 6-foot wide shoulders, striped and signed as bike lanes, and separated or attached 6 to 10-foot wide paths on both the north and south sides of the roadway. The 3-lane section transitions back to a 2-lane section just east of Ridgecrest Drive. The south pathway ends at Rock Ridge Drive and connects to existing pathway along east side of Rock Ridge Drive. For Phase 2, the description has changed a little bit in that they are planning to only construct at this time is the pathway on the south side of the road. We'll have discussion tonight, but they are hoping to be able to construct both pathways. As for lighting, on Phase 1, they'll have continuous highway illumination with an adaptive LED system, allowing light levels to be adjusted depending on variables such as traffic volume. The proposed continuous illumination will encourage non-motorized use of the corridor in the dark winter months. For Phase 2, lighting along the corridor will be limited to sections that are presently illuminated. O'Malley Road near R Road is the only candidate for new lighting installation. The project design will help to preserve the dark sky character noted in the Hillside District Plan and through public input. No landscaping is proposed for Phases 1 or 2 of the project. A mid-block crossing is needed at Independence Drive for pedestrian bicyclist crossing. This crossing allows users to reach retailers and offices on Independence Drive, as well as enabling transit riders to reach people mover bus stops on Commodore Drive and Independence Drive. There is an attachment that shows the location of the existing transit routes and stops. A noise wall is shown on sheets F1 and F3 for Phase 1. The majority of tenants at the Commodore Park condominiums were in support of the noise barrier. The wall will be constructed of wood and is 10 foot tall and transitions to 8 feet. The wood barrier represents an opportunity to provide a design element, yet the barrier is shown without any enhancement. No landscaping is provided either to soften the view of the wall. There is a clear opportunity to include landscaping in the wide median near the Seward Highway and O'Malley intersection, adjacent to the pedestrian crossing, but this opportunity has not been seized. The median is approximately 35 feet wide at its widest point. Without plant materials, this intersection will be a harsh visual environment. Phase 2 shows pathways on both sides of the road, except for the section between Rock Ridge Drive and Hillside Drive. The narrative notes that ADOT has removed the south pathway due to public input concerning fast bicyclists, tree clearing, and right-of-way impacts. In a conversation with Cynthia Ferguson, who is with us tonight, she stated that the pathway has been included and had been included in earlier plans, but has since been removed. Regarding some of review comments, the non-motorized transportation coordinator had commented that the bike lanes in this area should be painted green or blue to better notify drivers that the bike lane is still active in this area. As for Phase 2, the DESR notes that the pathway on the north side could be eliminated. The north side of O'Malley Road will be in the sun and offer snow melt earlier in the season and make walking easier. The project description notes that colored pattern concrete will add $810,000. We request that should bids come in higher than budgeted construction funds, that the colored pattern concrete be eliminated ahead of removing any pedestrian pathways from the project. And she went on to say that she does not concur with the explanation in Section G about not building the south side pathway between Rock Ridge Drive and Hillside Drive. The construction of the pathway is meeting an approved plan, and it's a safety issue. This should not be driven by public comment, as is explained on page 3. Tree clearing is not a legitimate reason to not install a pathway and force people to cross O'Malley Road mid-block or walk on the roadway shoulder. We request the pathway be extended Hillside Drive. Now I get to the department recommendations. I do want to say that yesterday, Terry and I met with DOT. Well, we didn't meet with DOT. We had a conference call with them yesterday, and we talked about the conditions. Ms. Ferguson, earlier in the week, a couple of days had submitted a response to the conditions. And what I'm going to do now is go through the conditions. So if you all can look at page 11. And on some of these conditions, DOT concurred with. Some of them they concurred with but wanted to modify the condition. And in other cases, they didn't concur. So for condition number 1, they did concur with that one. Condition 2, they offered a modification, and I'll read their modification. Condition 2 was regarding the provide a mid-block pedestrian crossing at the Independence Drive intersection. And what they've offered is if warranted by future pedestrian crossing volumes between the pathway along the south side of O'Malley Road and Independence Drive, DOT will evaluate treatments to provide for pedestrian crossing at this location. That's okay. We discussed it yesterday, but we would like to have some sort of time frame, or they had said that without having any pedestrians, because there are no pedestrian facilities along, that they would want to, they would want to evaluate the number of pedestrians in this area and determine if there is in fact a need for a crossing. And that's fine, that makes sense, but we would like to put, at some point that they evaluate the need for it, and possibly return when they've got the results in hand, and let us know when that might be possible. Otherwise, it's just open-ended, and to leave these open-ended means it likely may not happen. Okay, moving on to condition 3. Condition 3 was ADOT shall consider painting green or blue the area between the skip lines for the bike lanes shown on sheet H41 to better notify drivers that the bike lanes are active in this area. They offered a modification to that, which I'll read. It says DOT does not concur with this condition. DOT is concerned that paint or methyl methacrylate would not be durable and may be slippery for bicyclists under certain weather conditions. They offer the following modification. DOT shall consider a method of coloring green or blue the area between the skip lines for the bike lane shown on O'Malley Road Reconstruction Phase 1, sheet H41, to better notify drivers that the bike lanes are active in this area, that is durable, cost-effective, and does not reduce the surface friction of the bike lane. That was okay with Terry and I. However, again, we'd like to have, some sort of time frame from when they're going to investigate these types of materials and determine what will work in this area. They had mentioned on the phone that some of the citations that Lori Skanke, the non-motorized transportation coordinator, had mentioned were from Portland and I think Phoenix, southern cities. So they were going to investigate what might be doable in a northern climate. And I mentioned Minneapolis. Minneapolis is a biking capital. So I'm sure they have already looked at this. Terry had offered colored asphalt should work well. I mean, colored asphalt is used all over town, and it seems to have held up well. So again, we'd like some sort of time frame of when they will make these studies and let us know how they are proceeding on that. Condition, Condition 4. Which is in Phase 2, if a pedestrian pathway is eliminated from the construction in the short term due to available funding, consider constructing the pathway on the south side of the road and postponing the pathway on the north side of the road. If a follow-on project is needed to construct the proposed pathway, provide a timeline for construction. They offered a modification to this. It said DOT concurs with this condition but must defer to AMATS regarding funding and funding timelines for any future follow-on projects. Again, we had Craig Lyons, who's is the AMATS person with the municipality, president at the meeting, the conference call that we had with DOT yesterday. And in 2005, AMATS had presented funding requests to put in a pathway on one side. It's looking like now that they may have federal funding for it, and so with federal funding, they may be able to put a pathway on both sides of the road. But I'll leave that for DOT to discuss when they get up to the mic. This may be something, well, that, you know, once they have determined that they do have the funding available to put the pathway on the north and south, again, it's something that they can come back to UDC and talk about that. So we might be able to cover a lot of these issues in just one kind of follow-up meeting. Condition 5, consider extending the pathway on the south side of O'Malley Road from Rock Ridge Drive to Hillside Drive in accordance with the approved Anchorage Pedestrian Plan, Anchorage Bicycle Plan, the Hillside District Plan, and the interim, I should correct, that's incorrect, it should be 2035, Metropolitan Transportation Plan. And as for 5, they concurred with a condition, and I'll read that. DOT concurs with condition, but will consider extending the separated facility on the south side between Rock Ridge Drive and Hillside Drive. However, preliminary analysis indicates that as many as 4 residential properties may need to be acquired. DOT also offers the final minor modifications, and it had to do with my putting 2015 instead of 2035, and another thing, minor. That one's moving on to condition 6. Phase 2, in the absence of a pathway on either the north or south side of the road, then paved connectors shall be provided to enable access from the side of the road without a pathway to the side with the separated pathway. These paved accesses shall be provided at existing side streets. They concur with this condition. Paved connections will be provided at the points of termination. As for condition 7, phase 2, ensure that signing, striping, and road markings are included for bike lanes. They also concur with that one. Condition 8, provide plant material consisting of trees and shrubs in the median near the Seward Highway and O'Malley intersection in accordance with the 2020 comp plan. They do not concur with this condition. It says, in addition to, this is a rather lengthy statement, so please try and listen to this one. In addition to the clear zone and moose vehicle collision concerns noted in the application narrative, DOT is also concerned with satisfying its policies and procedures as well as reducing maintenance and operation costs to the extent practicable. Per DOT policy and procedure, beautification of the highway right-of-way, trees, shrubs, and other fixed hazards, collectively referred to as fixed hazards, are not allowed on controlled access facilities or within a minimum distance depending on the speed of the roadway and the presence of curb and gutter. Although O'Malley Road is not a controlled access facility itself, the controlled access for the Seward Highway extends approximately 100 feet to the east along O'Malley Road. Given the posted speed limit of O'Malley Road in this area, 45 miles per hour, fixed hazards would need to be offset 10 to 36 feet. While an area of grass could be provided within the median, the colored pattern concrete proposed will be more cost-effective to maintain over the life of the project. In our discussion with them yesterday, we determined that shrubs would not be in violation of their fixed hazards policy, and they did agree to put shrubs in the median. However, they would want the municipality to maintain the shrubs. We haven't yet discussed this. The Parks Department is the department that maintains all the landscaping along the roadways. We haven't yet had a chance to discuss this with them to see if this is a possibility or not. So that is something else that we would have to, follow up on and come back and let the UDC know what the decision has been. Moving on to condition 9. This one reads, provide a decorative element to the wood noise barrier in phases 1 and 2, and/or provide trees or shrubs to soften the visual effect of the 8-foot and 10-foot tall barrier. DOT did concur with this, and they offered a modification to that condition, which reads, provide a decorative element to the wood noise barrier in phases 1 and 2 to soften the visual effect of the barriers. In our discussion yesterday, we were a little bit hesitant about who was going to design this decorative wood fence, and we requested that a landscape architect or an artist do it. They were going to see if DOT had a landscape architect that they could have hopefully design this decorative element to the wood noise barrier. Condition 10 reads, if not already provided, show detectable warning tile at pedestrian crossings. DOT did concur with that. Condition 11, install bike lane in signs at westbound Lake Otis Parkway. They did concur with that one. Condition 12, ensure that pedestrian crossings with pork chop crossings are shown with pedestrian crossing signs. They did concur, but they had a condition, and that reads, DOT concurs with this condition. However, DOT has made modifications to the design of this median, and there is not a free right at this location. Turning traffic will be stop controlled. And this was the pork chop in phase 1 at Independence Drive. Condition 13 reads, consider reallocating the funds for the colored pattern concrete in phase 1 to the provision of a paved pathway on the north side of the road in phase 2 that may be delayed due to a funding shortfall. They do not concur with this. The colored pattern concrete is needed as a median treatment for the O'Malley Road Reconstruction Phase 1 project and is cost effective from a maintenance perspective. We're not in opposition to using the colored pattern concrete along the edges of the road. However, I was in support of Lori's comment regarding the cost of it, and the cost would be better put to putting a pathway on either side of the road. This may not be an issue if it's determined that DOT does in fact get the funding to put a pathway on both sides of the road in phase 2. So any questions?
Yes. So what's the requirement? Why it's not landscape in phase 1 and 2?
The issue is that there is a comp plan policy that addresses the need to, it's in my report, that it needs that has a need to enhance road projects. However, there's some discussion whether or not DOT has to comply with the design criteria manual, which Anchorage, all municipal roads have to adhere to. So that's sort of a situation where we are at this point. But I didn't, as you can see on pages 2 and 3 of my staff report, I didn't agree with their justification for it regarding the moose vehicle collisions. I think there's no evidence to support their statement.
Commissioner Miller?
Yes, thank you. Just a couple things. On condition 3, you had a discussion with DOT regarding the paint, and you had said durable, effective, and I'm just trying to pinpoint conditions: durable, effective, and
It said
cost effective.
durable, cost-effective, and does not reduce the surface friction of the bike lane.
Okay, and then, hang on a second. You had mentioned a timeline,
Right.
and did you have an opinion on what sort of timeline you were thinking?
Well, hopefully before they construct, so they would be back, you know, it's up to them to determine, you know, their schedule of when they want to proceed with that is in some information that I asked them to provide. It's in some of these follow-up emails of when they intend to construct. So obviously, while they're still in the design phase, they would need to determine, you know, look at some other cities where DOT or municipal road projects, how they have dealt with this in a northern climate.
Sharon, could I interrupt?
Sure.
Terry Schoenthal here, current planning manager. And I think in our discussion with DOT on that particular topic, it wasn't so much about a timeline that we expected an answer on that. It's that right now it says that DOT will consider installation of some colored material. And they actually brought up some good suggestions of, as you may know, you've seen in some locations in town now, they're using that abrasive surface. And there's apparently an ability to get colored aggregate for that they could use for something like that. But they would prefer to wait and to see how that surface holds up through our winters, because it hasn't really been tested under plowing conditions and everything yet. But the idea would be to come up with something by the time that they're ready to construct. It's that our concern is if we just say consider it, then it's pretty easy to say, well, we did consider it and we didn't include it.
Okay, thanks. And then regarding condition 4, and the staff recommended the south side of the road, consider constructing the pathway on the south side of the road and postponing the pathway on the north side of the road, which is conflicts with Lori's, non-motorized transportation's recommendation to have the north side constructed, and I was just wondering about your rationale there.
If they put in, you know, either when they construct now, they put in a pathway on the south side, and then some point in the future, they put in the pathway on the other side of the road. We wanted them to look at putting a pedestrian pathway, let's see, on the south side. Oh, if it is, sorry, I'm confusing it with another condition. Let me read that. Yeah, again, we'll have to hear what DOT says, you know, in terms of whether or not they have the funding to put pathways on both sides of the road. If they do, then this one may not be an issue. If we hear from them that they don't have funding to do one, then to do one in the immediate future, they're going to put the pathway on the north side at some future date. Again, we'd like to hear what they think that timeline might be.
Okay, thanks. I guess the last thing is there's quite a few revisions to these conditions, and I'm afraid that if we were to try to nail them down on the fly, that we'll make some mistakes.
Right.
And maybe this is some discussion we can have later, but I'm not quite sure how to revise all these conditions on the fly.
Through the chair, what we might think about, the commission might think about doing is, Lori, if you could help me with this, it's called you go out of session for a discussion, and then you come back into session. What is that called? I've just forgotten the name.
Through the chair, Committee of the Whole.
Committee of the Whole. So you can make a motion to go into Committee of the Whole, which gives you the opportunity to freely discuss the conditions. And then once you have it kind of all ironed out, I can read these modifications again. That's no problem. We can go through them again. And then when you have it all down, then we can come out of Committee of the Whole and then take up the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of staff?
Yes, so I went back and read about the moose and that there's not been that much accident and that there's different techniques to put plants that they're not attractive to moose. Why is the only condition that we have it's to the number 8 that calls for landscape or vegetation? I mean, there's other reason why not to add some landscape?
No, I think with DOT, their issue is that they don't have funding for maintenance. I think that is their main issue, but they can talk about that when they come up to the mic. But also a thing to bear in mind is what it says on page 1 at the bottom. State of Alaska Statute 3530020 states a department shall comply with local planning and zoning ordinances and other regulations in the same manner and to the same extent as other landowners.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no other questions for staff, I think I'll request that the petitioner come forward. And before you give your presentation, if you could just please state and spell your name for the record, and if you would like to reserve time for rebuttal. There won't be rebuttal. Okay, no rebuttal.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Cynthia Ferguson, CYNTHIA-FERGUSON. I'm the project manager with the Department of Transportation and Public Facilities for the O'Malley Road Phase 1 and Phase 2 reconstruction projects. I also have with me Christopher Post, CHRISTOPHERPOST. He's the project engineer with the Department of Transportation and Public Facilities and for O'Malley Road Phase 1. And I also have Kelly Kilpatrick, KELLYKILPATRICK, and she's the project manager with Dow for O'Malley Road Phase 2. I grew up in a neighborhood along O'Malley Road, so it's a project near and dear to my heart. I could talk about it for a long time, but I know we're short on time, so I'll try to be brief today. And a little bit about the current conditions, as was mentioned in the staff report. The road was originally constructed in 1962, and it hasn't had any major reconstruction since that time, only minor intersection improvement projects. The posted speed limits are 45 to 50 miles an hour. Within O'Malley Road Phase 1, the moose accident rate is in the top 5th percentile in the state, and that's based on a 2014 evaluation by DOT based on accident data from 2006 to 2010. And I know in the staff report it did mention that they hadn't found any recent moose collision information, and I'm wondering if that has to do with our low snow years. It's a little bit unpredictable when you're going to have the moose vehicle collisions. But based on our historical data, we do have a high incidence of moose vehicle collision within the Phase 1 corridor. And if you drive O'Malley Road today, you don't need me to tell you that it operates over capacity certain times during the day. In 2013, average daily traffic was 16,000 vehicles, and we're expecting that to grow to about 21,000 vehicles within the Phase 1 limits by 2035. So to address these conditions, reconstruction of O'Malley is proposed. It's a little different from a rehabilitation where we're doing more targeted improvements. This is a wholesale rebuild of the entire roadway. The project is included in the AMATS Transportation Improvement Plan. The project is planned to be federally funded, and the Federal Highway Administration is the department's funding partner. They contribute approximately 93% of the funding, and the state contributes the remaining 7%. And throughout the development process for the project, we've had extensive public involvement. maintained a website, had several public meetings. So we've had very intensive involvement with the public. So what's the scope of Phase 1? As was mentioned, we're reconstructing from Seward Highway to Livingston Street. It's a distance of about 1.1 miles. We're proposing to construct a 4-lane divided roadway with median and openings, left turn lanes as appropriate, continuous illumination with adaptive LED system, which will allow us to change the light levels depending on traffic volume and other variables. We'll have 6 to 8 foot wide shoulders, which will be signed and striped as bike lanes, and separated multi-use pathways that'll be paved 10 foot wide on both the north and south sides of the roadway. I brought a display of our typical sections, and really the only difference between those two is the curved and the uncurved, which changes how we're handling the drainage of the roadway. And I'd like to do just a quick run through of the project and just go through each of the major intersections and highlight some of the changes that the project is proposing. So we'll start at the west end at the Seward Highway. So at the Seward Highway, we do have the curb and gutter section. And we're also proposing a bioswale in support of the MS4 permit and the Green Roads Initiative, and that'll be constructed here. And we will also have the noise wall that was discussed that will protect the Commodore Park condominium. Moving on to Commodore Drive intersection. Here we'll have a dedicated left turn pocket for the left turning traffic into Commodore Drive, and we'll have the 2 through lanes continuing through. This will help alleviate the issue right now where we have a lane drop and we have a lot of left turning traffic, and there can be quite a bit of aggressive driving in this area at certain times of the day. We're also proposing a profile change in this area, so we'll be reducing the crest hill that you come over at the St. John's Methodist Church, and we're reducing that about 7 feet. And you'll also notice the bike lane signing and striping in this area. So next is Independence Drive. Here we transition to the rural section, so there's no curb and gutter. These would be just shoulders, signed and striped as bike lanes. This is the sag curve area through Moose Meadows. We'll be raising the sag here by about 8 feet. We'll be providing a opening in the median for the eastbound left turning traffic to turn onto Independence Drive. We have modified the pork chop island at Independence slightly from what you had in your packet. So the pedestrians will be crossing in front. We've moved the stop bar a little further down so that they're not so far back from the intersection.
If you, excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt, but if you want to move that mic over a little bit.
And also in support of the MS4 permit and the Green Roads Initiative, we also have some rock-lined ditches that will slow the stormwater before it enters the existing wetlands to help recharge them. And again, you can see the continuation of the signing and striping of the bike lanes. And then we are at Lake Otis Parkway. Here we transition back to the curb and gutter section, which will match with the curb and gutter section on Lake Otis Parkway. We'll add an additional southbound right turn lane at Lake Otis. And the additional 3 lanes on O'Malley will help reduce congestion at this intersection. And that brings us to the transition at Livingston Street, where we'll be transitioning into Phase 2 project, and I'll turn the presentation over to Kelly to talk about Phase 2.
Make sure you're talking into the mic.
Oh, sorry. I already forgot.
And maybe introduce yourself and then spell your name. I know. She did.
Oh, okay. No, sorry. I didn't. Kelly Kilpatrick with Dowell, Kelly Kilpatrick. I'm the project manager for Phase 2. So I'll start at Livingston. As Cindy said, this is where we're transitioning. It'll be continue the 3-lane. There'll be some overlap where we tie into Phase 1 once it's constructed first. So we'll continue with that 3-lane section with pathways on both sides. So from here to Elmore, it's all pathway on both sides. There are some and it's a rural section, but there are some areas we're introducing low-profile curb, and that's to collect water in the drainage system and try to avoid some extremely large cuts. Specifically around Cage, we're cutting down about 2.5 feet to improve sight distance and to avoid large impacts of right-of-way, so trying to reduce impacts. And then as we go through Elmore Road, it continues. We've introduced some raised medians at the intersections. That's where our pattern concrete is within the project. And as you continue up, so it's 10-foot lanes all the way up until you get to Birch. And then that's where we start changing the pathway up a little bit. It gets challenging once we hit Birch, because Birch, as it continues up, has slopes from 5 to 7%, and we're getting a lot of impacts to residents that have their homes right against right-of-way. So, and I want to start with, back in 2014, we did a plans and hand submittal that had, as you've heard, 2 pathways, the whole length of the project, 10-foot paved pathways. So from the impacts that we realized from those pathways, a lot of right-of-way takes, full acquisitions, we went back and tried to see how we can minimize it. So we also looked at reducing maybe to a 6-foot pathway. So we ran the pathway 6 foot from Birch, and that was typically on the south side, so from Birch up to Hillside Drive. Still some impacts, specifically between Rock Ridge and Hillside Drive, looking at impacts to 7 parcels, 4 potential acquisitions, but there's a lot of wells and septic systems that are right along the right-of-way or even outside the right-of-way. So that's where the whole taking a pathway out between Rock Ridge and Hillside Drive came in. Is we did look at it, and also funding for the north pathway. The reason why we switched it to the north...
Sorry, I have to interrupt.
Oh, okay.
So we've run out of time, but I would love for you to continue. If you could go ahead and
Thank you.
sum up your
Okay.
presentation. Thank you.
Oh, no, it's okay. It's probably me shaking. Ugh, you guys make me nervous. No, so to the north pathway, and the reasoning, it's I think, Miller, I think you had asked this question of why is it the north pathway on the south, sorry, why is the pathway on the south versus the north, which was in the plan. And the reason we did that is because funding and the impacts on the north are greater because of all the utilities. So the cost of putting the north pathway in is about $4 million, and it's mostly utility impacts. It's not necessarily right-of-way. So that's why the project decided to push it on the south. We agree with the north melts, within a week or 2 sooner, but that's where the decision came, to keep it on the south and then look for additional funding to put the north pathway in. Anything else? I don't think so.
Thank you. Almost made it.
I know.
Okay, do we have questions? And there they are. Commissioner Morse?
Thank you, Chair. While we're on the topic, are the drawings that we have in your packet provided, are those incorrect for Phase 2? I'm seeing the north path going all the way past Hillside Drive.
The north path continues all the way. It's the south path that stops
And that was
it.
the difficult one.
They're correct.
Thank you.
Commissioner Condon?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. For this condition number 8, says provide plant material consisting of trees and shrubs. And you say, yeah, it's okay if the municipality maintains those. But when it comes to the noise barrier, this, a 10-foot and 8-foot wall, which does seem somewhat austere, you've agreed to do some kind of ornamentation, decoration. Why do you not consider putting trees along that the wall rather than just simple decoration, trees have the advantage of changing over time. They're alive, they move, they have, I think, a stronger ability to mitigate the austerity of the big wall. Would you consider putting trees along those noise barriers?
There's a couple issues with it, and in addition to the concerns about the moose vehicle collisions, there's also the issue of the clear zone and wanting to make sure we don't have any fixed hazard or obstacles that would be a hazard to vehicles that might depart the roadway. We are also concerned, and we don't want any sort of attractant from the trees to attract the moose. And the other issue that we brought up in our response to the conditions was that we do have a policy and procedure for a controlled access facility, and the controlled access for the Seward Highway actually does extend down O'Malley. So in that area, the policy says you should not put any trees, shrubs, or fixed hazard within the controlled access facility, and then it allows out, if the facility is not controlled access, it gives some criteria for how close those can be to the roadway. So in addition to all those concerns, we are probably another large concern for the state is the maintenance. And a hardscape is a lot less labor intensive to maintain than a living tree that would change and need to be trimmed, or if it gets spruce, whatever kind of tree it was, and make it sick and needs to be removed. So it's a lot more labor intensive for the state, and that's why we would agree would consider a aesthetic treatment for the wall as preferable, as it would require less maintenance.
I think your terminology, hardscape, is appropriate because it's
Right.
A hard visual impact as well. Would you consider something like vines or something that would something other than a hardscape to mitigate the impact of that wall? Because these walls, I think, are quite intrusive and quite oppressive.
I'm not, it's completely out of my area of expertise what sort of vine might survive or be acceptable or not be a moose attractant, so I couldn't speak to that. I can say we would prefer something that would be lower maintenance and some sort of a hardscape aesthetic treatment.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Morse?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not convinced that was working. The green, the graphic green, what do you fill in the setback area that's disturbed with that fills that green?
That would be topsoil and seeded with a weed-free seed mix with plant materials that meet the I forget the term for the Alaska Plant Materials Center, the seed mix requirement.
Thank you.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Okay, so what's your requirements for landscape for these projects, for phase 1 and phase 2? Independently of the moves, what's your requirements?
We're providing the colored pattern concrete. We'll provide the aesthetic features to the noise walls. We're providing the LED illumination along phase 1, and then at the locations along phase 2 that were mentioned.
So you are completely complying with all requirements?
That's my understanding. We are the Hillside District Plan calls for natural vegetation, and the project is either within the limits or bounded by the Hillside District Plan, and as I understand, that's been adopted as part of the comprehensive plan.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions for the petitioner? Oh. Commissioner Morse?
Thank you. There are 2 bus stops, and I found very little information. This is correct, right? 2?
Yes, there are 2. We're proposing improvements to 2 bus stops, and then we're modifying. So there are 2 existing bus stops near the Seward Highway, and we're proposing to improve those with a ADA compliant concrete bus pad. And then there are existing bus stops along Lake Otis Parkway. One where it's a pull-out style. We're not making any changes other than repaving. And then the other one we're actually modifying to a on-street stop at the direction of transit. It was it had a low ridership at that stop, and it would have required a right-of-way acquisition to install a bus pad, so they agreed that it should be made an on-street stop. So we are making that modification at Lake Otis.
Commissioner Miller.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The speed limit here is 50 miles an hour, is that right? 45, 50, somewhere in there?
It varies, yes, from about, it's 45 from the Seward Highway up to about 500 feet, I believe it is, east of the United Methodist Church, and then it's 50 miles an hour, the remainder.
Okay, and are those required speed limits for, so this isn't my area, but with the funding that you have or with the capacity that you're trying to attain, are those speed limits required or are they flexible? And the reason I ask is because there's a bike path along there, and I've been passed by cars on my bike going 50 miles an hour, and it's quite scary. So I'm just wondering if there's any options, if you will.
It is consistent with, well, at least within Phase 1, the roadway is classified as an arterial, and that is consistent with an arterial speed, especially in this kind of transition area from the suburban to urban environment, to have a 45 to 50 mile an hour speed limit. I have talked some with our traffic safety engineer about it, and it is, we have not had a lot of public comment or input that the speed limit should be changed. It's consistent with the type of facility it is, and so we're not proposing any changes to the speed limit at this time.
That's a 8 to 10 foot pathway or a shoulder? Is that right?
The shoulder would be 6 to 8 feet wide, and then the pathways are 10 feet wide.
Okay, thanks. And then I do have another question. I think this is to staff, and I don't know if this is the appropriate time for that, but regarding condition 8, the DOT's revision would be to have MOA maintain any median plantings. How does MOA feel about that? Who would maintain that? Would that be street maintenance, and are they on board with that?
No, the maintenance of landscaping along the roadway is done by the Parks Department.
Okay, and is Parks, I know they're...
We haven't had it yet, an opportunity to discuss it with them. That was one thing that we thought that we would find out whether or not it was a possibility for the municipality to maintain the shrubs, and then come back and have that information when, DOT returns to address a lot of the other conditions.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Condon actually narrowly beat you, but I'm going to allow you to speak since it's on the topic.
I think if we address some of these as maybe provide shrubs, but if municipality is not willing to maintain, then we'll do the color concrete. Like we could change a little the words so it happens, but if there's issues, then it's an option. But that's my thoughts.
Thank you, Commissioner Sullivan. Commissioner Condon.
Yes, thank you. My question is for staff. You're saying that DOT will be back before us at a later date when they have considered things like, you know, some of these issues. So am I to understand that these conditions, these modified conditions, would be reworded, brought before us, and these issues for consideration with a given timeline are going to be resolved and presented to us in the future?
Through the chair, Mr. Condon, the decision whether or not DOT returns is the commission's. Staff offered that as a recommendation because a lot of these things were going to be, a lot of the conditions are going to be difficult to work out tonight because DOT has to go back and, you know, do a lot of studies, investigations, and regarding the maintenance, we have to do that as well. So I thought it was the best way to resolve these, but the decision is up to the commission. But as part of that, we will be working with DOT, you know, throughout this process and working on these conditions and exchanging information as we go along, and then perhaps still modifying the conditions that they are proposing for tonight, depending on, you know, what they find out and what we find out regarding the maintenance of plant materials.
So it's it sounds to me like we don't really have a package that's votable at this point, that there are so many unresolved issues that will be under consideration, that will be brought back before the UDC, that a vote tonight seems meaningless.
Through the chair, that is I mean, that's a reasonable conclusion. So again, it would be up to the commission whether they feel able to make a decision tonight, or they would ask DOT to resolve these issues and then return with a redesign, you know, once these issues have been worked out.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Okay, again, I think it's going to be about how we word every single of these conditions, you know, versus saying consider. We could always say provide, submit, and I think we can, that way at least we lock them into it needs to happen and not just consider, because consider is very, as Sharon mentioned at the start, it's not very, it's not doing much.
Commissioner Miller?
Thank you. I guess I'd put the question to you. How do you feel about if we were to postpone this? Would that delay your project? Would that be a significant hardship for you?
It would be more difficult for phase one. We are getting closer to a time when we want to advertise the project for competitive construction bids. Phase two, it would not be as much of a burden. And I do have written copies, if it would be helpful, of the modifications to the conditions that the department is proposing and which ones we concur with.
Okay, so if we decided to postpone a month, that would have a financial effect on the project.
It would, and I think the majority of the conditions are really targeted or addressing phase two. They are more addressing the issues of the pathway on phase two. So I would just offer that consideration.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
So Sharon, can we do a motion to do a committee into the whole?
Yes, I would. Could I ask a question? If you're all, Jerry still has one. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Sullivan, if you can please go in order. Commissioner Winchester.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the issue that I see is you're saying for phase one, if we could agree on the conditions for Phase 1 approval tonight, you'd be willing to come back with all this Phase 2 stuff and work all those things out. Is that what I'm hearing? Am I getting this correct? Or because I'm really looking at a lot of modifications to conditions here that could take us hours to try to sort through and figure out in a committee format here. And if we could narrow this down to just, okay, it's conditions 1 through 4, whatever the numbers are that we need to deal with tonight and come back with the rest of them later. Is that something makes sense, or are we just postponing a bigger problem? Sharon, what do you think? I'm asking both
yes.
Sharon and
Through the
before we
chair.
go into committee is what I'm asking.
Yes, through the chair. Mr. Winchester, I think, that's a reasonable suggestion, and maybe we could go through the conditions and identify the conditions that pertain to Phase 1. Also, do the commissioners have any other questions for the petitioner? If not, I had one.
Commissioner Morse?
Thank you, Chair. My question is, are you in agreement with all of the Phase 1 current recommendations? And if not, could we have those written statements?
Sure. I guess, can I pass these out?
Nicole. Just for the record, this would have been good to have before the meeting.
Yes, that was,
Just for future reference, pass that out ahead of time.
that's the
that we-
question I was going to ask, Commissioner. For staff, Sharon,
Wait, excuse me. Can we speak in turn, please? Thank you.
Oh.
Commissioner Morse, are you done?
I am. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I actually had a question. Sorry. I was in line first. Sorry. So I have a question for you, the petitioner. So I noticed that traffic's comments stated, and this is kind of a bone of contention with me. I work as a design engineer for the municipality of Anchorage for the most part, and I have to adhere to the requirements of the P&Z and UDC. And the traffic engineer mentioned that they'd already given comments in detail to the PS&E for Phase 1. So how come Phase 1 is already at PS&E and not at plans in hand? Why did we not see this?
It's a bit the unfortunate thing that happened, and this was not the only project that this happened to. There was a miscommunication between the municipality and DOT. When we were submitting our projects, we thought if we submitted the additional copies, they were making it through the additional review process. We were getting comments from planning and zone, and we thought that things were going as they were supposed to, and we just weren't aware that we weren't doing that correctly. So we did have a meeting between all the managers at DOT and at the municipality, and I believe it was around 2012 or so, and we all went through and cleared out, discussed our process for submitting plans to the municipality, and also the municipality's process for submitting plans to DOT for review. And so unfortunately, O'Malley Phase 1 was already past some of the steps that we normally would have liked to see. And then as we talked, we were ready to present the projects, talking with planning, they thought it would be best to show this as one combined project, as one case, so that we could present it all together as a complete picture of our entire plan for the roadway. So unfortunately, yes, that kind of really shines a bright light on the fact that they're a little bit at different points in the development. So I apologize. That was, definitely just staff and experience on knowing how we should get through the process on DOT's part.
Okay, and it's ironic because Phase 1 has got really not a lot of issues as opposed to Phase 2.
So it worked.
It may work out.
Yeah.
Thank you. Commissioner Condon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm curious, has staff seen this document that was just passed out to us?
Yes, we have.
Okay, and so when did you see it? And why is this not incorporated into our package that we're looking at?
It's something that we don't normally accept comments, responses to conditions after the fact, and so we decided instead to meet with DOT, and so we had that discussion yesterday. I just got that copy, was made aware of it on Tuesday, and we met with them the same day. So yesterday afternoon.
Okay. So what I'm seeing here is a process that has gotten sideways, that protocol and procedure is not being followed, and that the petitioner is asking for us to break this project, this submittal, into two different phases, and we're going to vote on some of the conditions, but some maybe not others. And just as a note, I disagree. Phase 1 has some serious problems like the sound barrier and the landscaping down there at Seward Highway. I think these are major issues that should be considered further, and I really don't think that we have an appropriate submittal to vote on.
Thank you, Commissioner Condon. Any other discussion, questions for the petitioner? Oh, yes.
This is a question, if I may, Madam Chair, to the petitioners. Could you identify for the commissioners where the noise wall is shown on the plans? I think it's in two parts.
So it starts on sheet F1 of the plan set, and this is for the phase 1 noise wall, and it's on the north side of the roadway, and you'll see a little leader going to it, noise barrier fence 10 feet high, and then it will continue on sheet F3, and F is in Frank, and you'll see another leader. It's on the north side of the roadway, continuing along in front of the condominiums, noise barrier fence 10 feet high, and then it turns the corner north along Commodore Drive, and there's a note pointing to that noise barrier fence 8 feet high. And then Kelly can point out to you for phase 2.
Yes, it's shown on page 126. It's in the southwest corner of Elmore Road and O'Malley, and it's pointed out as proposed noise wall. About 2 to 5 feet away from the right-of-way there in the southwest corner. And it's also 8 feet tall.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch on phase 2 where it starts.
Page 126. Southwest quadrant of Elmore, along the southwest right-of-way, along O'Malley Road.
Page, do you know what sheet number that is?
Yes, it is sheet F8.
F8, okay. Okay, a follow-up question to that. Your response to that was regarding the fixed wall. As for landscaping, there it says that because landscaping is not possible because of the DOT policy and procedure, that says on controlled access facilities you could not put landscaping there, and that although O'Malley Road is not a controlled access facility, the controlled access for the Seward Highway extends approximately 100 feet to the east along O'Malley Road. It appears to me that the noise barrier is well beyond 100 feet, so it doesn't seem to me that that policy applies in this case.
And then there would also be a limit to the offset based on the speed of the road and the presence of curb and gutter or not
And
curb and
again,
gutter.
the road is, the barrier seems to be offset quite a distance from the, so the offset
right.
is measured from where? The edge of the roadway, or where is the offset measured from?
I believe it's the edge of the roadway.
Okay, so and can you tell me what the location, what the offset is for that noise barrier fence?
Sorry, I didn't bring a scale to scale it off the plans, but I can say, we do still have the additional concerns of the maintenance responsibility and the potential of it being a moose attractant.
Okay, so it seems to be that your main objection is the maintenance of the landscaping, because the offset it's way beyond 10 feet. I mean, I can eyeball it and see from the edge of the roadway. So, okay, I just wanted, and then on of course, phase 2, it's, that wouldn't apply either.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, that's the question that I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Ferguson? Any other questions? Okay, I guess this case rests with the commission. Oh, no. Every time I look away, Commissioner Winchester.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm looking at this list, and I'm seeing that the only ones that you do not concur with are items 2, 3, 8, and 9, and 13. Am I right?
9 we do concur with, but we just offered the modification that we'd prefer a decorative
Okay,
element over yes.
Understood, but
Yes.
you concur, I'm sorry. Okay, you offered a modification, so
Yes.
9 is okay. So basically, you're saying the only ones that you have something you really want to work on is 2, and I'm just 3, 8, and 13. Is that correct?
Correct.
And everything else, everybody's in agreement on? Is that, I'm kind of asking both, Sharon, is that way you read this too?
Through the chair, yes, that's somewhat correct, but, I mean, they concur with it, but then they offer a modification to some of these, so it's not so cut and dry. There are a few of them where they do say they do concur with it, and there is no, modification that they are offering to it. And I think
if there's a if they're concurring with the condition, like in number 4, in regards to funding and something on something, if we pass it based on your statement, then they have to come to you and work out whatever this other issue is. I guess what I'm trying to do is, again, boil this down to 3 or 4 issues, not 14. And I understand that there's some differences here. If we can get through this tonight, it seems to me the only way we get through this tonight, in my perspective, is that we boil it down to 3 or 4 items that we work on, and everything else gets concurred on. Otherwise, we could be here all night trying to sort out the language that everybody wants to feel comfortable with.
right, and I don't know that I have anything I can offer than what I've already said. There are a couple of these that they do concur with without any modification to the condition, and that is condition 1. I think it's condition 6 and condition 7. I think that are the 3 that they concur. Oh, well, condition 10 also, and condition 11. Those they concur with outright without offering any modification. Am I correct on that, Cindy?
I believe we also concur with condition 5. We only had minor. That was just the minor modifications to the 2035 plan. And
Okay. This concerns extending a separated facility on the south side between Rock Ridge Drive and Hillside Drive?
Right, and that condition read, consider extending the pathway on the south side.
Oh, because it had the wording consider.
Right. We do.
So, right. So that's up to the commission whether or not they want to consider extending the separated facility on the south side of the road.
But that was also in yours.
Yes, it was, but subsequently, we've had some discussion about that. We wanted them to look at the engineering, the reason why, and perhaps, you know, the petitioner is probably better able to explain it, but there are a number of issues. They haven't quite completed the engineering on that. They may be able to, they may not be able to extend the pathway on the south side between those Rock Ridge Drive and Hillside Drive, but they don't know at this point because they haven't completed the engineering.
Terry Schoenthal again. I'm not entirely sure that was accurate because when we did meet with them, they had done the engineering on that quite a bit, and what they discovered, I think, for that south side of the trail is that due to the topographical impacts along that it was a really difficult thing to be able to get that trail completed through there. We have a plan that says we want the trail there, but it's not unusual once you get into the nuts and bolts of a project like this to discover that that's a really tough thing. And fundamentally, one of the bottom line things is that none of us could come up with a case where we had actually imposed purchasing an entire home, basically an entire property, for the sake of putting a pathway in. And that's what would probably be required in this. So it isn't a real cut and dry thing. I mean, it's a very difficult thing to get that path in on the south side for that stretch. And so from my perspective on that, the idea that we say consider continuing the south side trail is a reasonable thing, that we take a closer look at it, perhaps as we go forward, but we have to do so with a pretty jaundiced eye that it'll be a really difficult thing.
Further, I think what I was trying to say is that they looked at it, but once they put a pathway in, it may make the driveways to about 4 of those properties pretty steep, but they haven't yet completed really looking at it, but they are aware at this point that they could be pretty steep.
Thank you, Mr. Schoenthal and Ms. Ferguson. And I'd like to add that the recommended bicycle network and the pedestrian plan, they asked to provide connection for a missing link. And so that's not necessarily a requirement for both sides of the road. They are providing a bike lane for the entire length, which does meet and or exceed the bike plan. And they are providing a separated pathway facility on one side of the road for the length of the project, which would meet the pedestrian plan. So I just wanted to make that note. Thank you. Any more discussion? No? Okay. I think we need to make a motion. I suppose you can sit down. That's what I've been told. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I have a motion from Commissioner Winchester and a second from Commissioner Sullivan. Commissioner Winchester, can you please state your motion?
Yes, Madam Chair. I'm going to move that we postpone because I feel that we are being asked to make decisions here about whether somebody's done some engineering and somebody's going to buy out a home, somebody's going to do this, that, the next thing. And we've got 13 conditions here in various stages of concurrence and non-concurrence. And I'm sorry, but that's just not what this board and commission is about, is to sit here and ferret this out at this kind of situation. It should come before us with very succinct and clear, demonstrative reasons why we either concur, we don't concur, and why. And so that's why I'm moving to postpone, because I feel like we're going to spend a lot of time, and I don't think we're going to get to a conclusion. And I think there's a lot of discussion that we have to have, but the truth is, it's discussion about things they can't even give us answers about.
Okay, Commissioner Winchester, thank you. So would this be something that the petitioner, you'd want them to come back in a month?
As soon as possible, as soon as they and Sharon have a chance to go through these conditions and really work out a, conclusive 13, 12, 4, 6 conditions, whatever it is, that are clearly defined. And if there's disagreement on those conditions, that's fine. We'll sort that out. But I don't want to try to sort out this many tonight with all these things left. So yes, as soon as possible. I'm next month, and I know that affects the project, but I don't think we're in a position to do this. If you feel differently, please, as a commissioner, state.
So, my apologies, I'm being educated over here. So I know that we do have reserved 2 meetings in a month, if necessary, if we go over. Would it be possible for them to come back, if they have their conditions figured out, to come back at that second meeting? And if we can get a quorum?
Right. Through the chair, we have this room reserved for UDC meetings twice a month. First meeting is the second Wednesday of the month, and the second meeting, is the fourth Wednesday of the month. So that would give them 4 to 6 weeks, to come back if they were from today's date, roughly, to try and. So in October is probably too early. So perhaps either the first or second meeting in November might be a possibility. Can I ask a question of the petitioner? Thank you. So it sounds like the board or the commission is moving to postpone this case. So do you have a comment as to when the earliest you think you could come back to visit the commission? Would it be October or November?
I would prefer October as soon as possible. Whenever I know some of the conditions, the discussion relies on the muni and maintenance possibilities, so I don't know their timeline, but I guess we would like to meet as soon as possible.
Thank you.
Lori, it might help. Do you have a calendar for October?
It's the 5th. The 12th and the 26th.
So either the 12th or 26th of October.
Oh. Commissioner Miller, would you like to say something?
Yeah, there's also 2 weeks from now.
That's what I was trying to suggest.
Yeah, if it's possible, but that, again, we'll hear from Ms. Ferguson, see what she thinks. There is a possibility 2 weeks from tonight.
And that's what I would suggest. I know you guys, it's time of the essence, and I think some of these issues that we need to work out with the MOA could be worked out with staff in the conditions.
Yeah, I think our question regarding the maintenance, we can definitely do within 2 weeks.
Right, okay.
So that, just for my understanding, that would be Wednesday, the 28th of September?
The 28th, that's correct.
That would be acceptable to us.
So then the only other question is if we'd have a quorum. And I'm not sure if we can make that determination. I'll be here.
I could have
Carried.
Corliss, since we have some missing members, send out an email tomorrow, polling the commissioners about their availability
Okay.
on the 28th.
Okay. So it sounds like it would either be the 28th or the 12th. We don't have any other cases on the 12th, so you'd be the only one again, so. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we should keep the packages and throw them to the garbage, like last time.
Okay. Is there any objection to postponing? No? Okay, we'll go ahead and postpone this case to either the end of September or beginning of October.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Okay, I guess we're moving on to, reports from the secretary. We actually had a discussion at some of our previous meetings to possibly take a ride on a site visit to visit some of these projects that we've overseen and just see how they've turned out. Probably some of the projects that we all had contention with, mostly vertical structures, I think, and site plans for private developments. But anyway, it's open for discussion. Is anybody interested in doing that?
Yes, I will be interested.
When you say a ride, what do you mean?
In a bus,
Oh.
all together?
Yeah, what we've done with the UDC in years past, some of you were on the board then, some weren't, but there is a possibility, the Parks Department, some of their facilities like Spenard Rec Center, Fairview Rec Center, they have buses. And so we have been able to borrow a bus for an evening from them. And, not a bus, I mean a van, one of those extended vans. And so we have driven around town and gotten out of the van and actually looked at some of the UDC projects that they had approved like 2-3 years previous. They were interested in seeing them just to look at kind of the maintenance of the plant materials, how it was done, and some various other issues. So they identified some projects that they wanted to visit that night, and so we just sort of mapped them out and went about visiting them in sort of methodical method in a way. So I was wondering, actually this came up in a meeting we had a little while ago. I think Nicole was part of it. And I just said that, yeah, we used to go out and do that. So if you'd like to do what we call the road trip, we could arrange that, but we'd want to know sort of what projects that you guys might want to look at.
Absolutely. I think that's a great idea, especially with some of the requirements that we are faced with, the new site plan requirements and everything. So maybe we can we do this via email correspondence?
Sure, absolutely.
Where everybody kind of puts in their vote for what we want to do, and okay, let's do that. And then I don't know if you want to initiate an email that just asks for a project.
I can do that, but bear in mind we don't have much more time before winter sets in, so we got to kind of jump on this.
Okay.
Through the chair, excuse me, you would also need to let us know if it's a quorum, it needs to be noticed. If
Yes,
you do any
that's
kind of
a good
site
point.
visits or anything as a quorum,
Okay.
you need to be noticed.
Because when UDC gets together, I think what the rules are, more than 3 members, we have to notice it as actually a meeting, to let them know that all the commissioners are getting together.
And that means 30 days before we can actually.
No, it's like 3 days, 2 days, something like that. What is it, Lori, do you know?
24 hours.
24 hours.
Also, if you guys would hang on to your packets from tonight, please. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that was my next question. Before we used to get the whole package again. Then it was like 3 months ago that people throw their packages and then we show up to the meeting and we didn't have the package. So it's normal that you reissue the package, or we should always hold them for sure?
No, only hold the ones that we're going to postpone.
Okay.
Yeah. The rest of them, if you've made a decision that night, there's no reason to hold on to them.
Okay.
And I think we'll have Sawhill and
Leonetti.
yeah, so that would be good. I think they were missing for this case.
They were definitely missing for this case.
And so I'll have to try and remember to remind them to, listen to the tape, and then they can participate in the next meeting.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there any other discussion? Oh, Commissioner Miller.
Yeah, I don't have any more discussion on the bus trip,
Okay.
but I do have another thing to bring up, and not to extend this out any more than we need to, but it seems to me that a lot of the cases that we have problems with are related to DOT projects. And I'm just wondering if there's any way that we could engage with a discussion with them offline about what their primary goals are, what the MOA's goals are, what we need to do, sort of like a workshop, maybe a luncheon, some way to have some discussion as to so these type of things don't happen again. And their primary drivers are exceptionally different than the municipality's drivers. They're about moving vehicles. Municipality is more about livability and aesthetics.
In the
making it
complete
nice.
street concept, yeah.
Yeah. So, and I don't even know if that's allowable, but I wanted to bring up the question.
Maybe Terry is best to answer this question, because he has had some conversations with DOT recently.
I think a lot of it is. I think that for example, the recommendation of putting landscaping up against that vertical wood wall is a very reasonable and appropriate thing to suggest. They are very concerned about maintenance, and I think it's a question that we as a municipality have to be ready to step up to the plate and take some responsibility for, because they truly do not have the capacity to do landscape maintenance. And so if we want that on those projects, we as a community have to be ready to step in and say we're going to maintain it. And that's a really reasonable question, and we'll have that talk with Parks, I think. They're not going to be overly receptive to it either, but we do it in an awful lot of parts of town. And the irony is that we say, okay, we're not going to be able to do any, we're not going to add amenities to our most important roads. It doesn't make very much sense. So to me, I think there's a lot of things that we can do. And I mean, I've been in conversations as a designer with them where I've been told, we are not putting any shrubs or trees in that project until we are absolutely told we have to. And I think the Urban Design Commission is our last line of defense on some of that.
Yeah, and that's hard because what we want to review is landscape, right? And then we show up to review no landscape. So it's kind of like, should we be reviewing all these projects anyway?
Well, I mean, I say ask for it. It's, they're in theory required to comply with our plans and with the plans that we have approved as a community. Their roads go through it, and state law says that they're supposed to comply with our plans. That's really the bottom line. And they do. They have real criteria that they should abide by for safety. But I think that they have to be real criteria.
Terry or Sharon, when you meet with Parks, can we get some sort of overall approval to give the board permission to assign the maintenance of these landscaped areas? Because there are dollars, and that's our city's money, so I want to be responsible with it. But maybe there's a list of plants that we're allowed to put in that the muni's happy to maintain, or
well, each
there's
project
got to be something.
Commissioner Morse, each project I think is going to be addressed differently, because each project when the DOT chooses not to maintain plant material, they enter into a memorandum of understanding with the municipality for that roadway that states the municipality accepts responsibility for maintenance of that. So, I mean, even in this, in a case where it's relatively minor, my guess is they're going to want to see some acknowledgement in writing that the municipality is willing to take that on.
And the point is, too, that a lot of the roadway vegetation that they might plant, I mean, the maintenance is very minimal.
It is
as
pretty
long
minimal, I
as
think.
you know, as long as you plant just plain old native-hearted something there, it's not, you know, it's not like you got to go water it every week. You know, we're not asking for, you know, for manicured landscaping.
I'd like to just, I'm actually hit my request to speak button. So, you know, how much of this, I know FHWA and federal funding covers landscaping in other DOTs. This is a cultural thing, I believe. And I think that when they ask for the money, they don't think about it, they don't care about it, and they don't adhere to the statute. And education, yes, but how do we get them to comply? I do think, and I sent Hal an email on this, that, you know, an educational workshop would be a good thing. I know that every quarter they have a quarterly meeting, and you're free to ask to be on the agenda. And either planning and or a commissioner, or both, maybe a planner and a commissioner, could attend the quarterly meeting and give a presentation. And the presentation would include what we'd like to see in the packet, because we don't want your big ream of paper. You know, I mean, there's very specific things we need. And secondly, what the requirements are. Or, you know, just get it out there. Get it out there in the open. They just kind of overlook it like, oh, I didn't know. And I just don't agree with that. You know, that's why I get so frustrated. I see a PS&E and a plans in hand in front of me. Why am I seeing a PS&E? You're telling me now that this project is going to get killed or delayed or financially burdened because you failed to adhere to the requirement of getting here at plans in hand. I'll tell you what, if I don't deliver an application to the municipality, Carol Wong or Sharon Ferguson are on the phone calling me, telling me, why are you not coming to the Planning and Zoning Commission or the Urban Design Commission? So I really have a hard time with the, oh, woe is me, they don't have the funding. I think there's a cultural shift that needs to happen. And how that happens, don't ask, I have no idea.
I think Terry pointed out the cultural shift is for the UDC is to require landscaping.
Just force it.
Yes. And then they will have no option. You know, I think that's the only thing that's going to drive it. I mean, yes, your suggestion of attending the quarterly meetings is a good one. But, you know, outside of that, there is no other way to push this forward. And the other point that when she said that when you asked the question about the PS&E versus the plans in hand, it's something I've noted over and over and over with DOT is that each project manager for their project, they're like in a silo. They don't talk to, there is no institutional thing there that they educate the project managers, like they have a big meeting, say, okay, this is the process for submitting road projects to the municipality. Each one, as far as I can tell, has to learn it on their own, and they often screw it up because of that reason. So it's a huge cultural shift. I don't know why I mean, that's a simple matter, why the head of the department at DOT couldn't get all the project managers together and, you know, that bring road projects to the municipality and say, okay, this is what the process is. We had a meeting with them, PM&E, myself, a few other people at the Muni had a meeting with DOT several years ago when this was still getting off the ground. We held it in the training room at our building. That entire training room was packed with DOT engineers. And I thought, okay, so we completely explained the process. We had handouts, we discussed it, we explained it, we were open for questions, and it still didn't seem to make any difference. It's still screwed up. each project manager works in a silo. I don't understand it, why one project manager doesn't go to the other and say, hey, you brought a project to the municipality last year, tell me what the process is. It seems simple to solve, but they haven't done it.
So it sounds like we need to hold their feet to the fire.
Yeah.
So, I guess that was kind of what I was getting at. Sounds like civil discourse is not really effective, or at least in the past. And the only way to have that cultural shift is to have the hammer of either the P&Z or UDC. Is that? I mean, are we fixed on that? Is that? I mean, as far as having a room full of engineers getting lectured about what they have to comply with, that's not going to be effective. It seems like it's a smaller discussion with some of the decision makers, and maybe it's a moot point. Maybe it'll never happen. But as far as, I don't think it's very effective to have a commission putting restrictive conditions on the DOT at the time, way past the time that they can actually plan for it or make some adjustments, is the most effective way of addressing it.
Commissioner Miller, we've had some recent discussions with them, and exactly on this line of discussion. One of the things that comes out is by the time they get here, they've already done environmental documents in federal cases, and it's just going to be too hard to make any changes. So we asked the question, well, then getting to you earlier would be a better thing? I mean, when do we need to do that? And so it seems like it can go both ways. If we get to them too early in the process, they argue, well, it's too early to make those kind of decisions now. But if we wait till later in the project, well, it's too late to get those kind of things incorporated. But one of the things I would say is, Sharon mentioned in our discussion that we had, Craig Lyon, who sits on AMATS, basically heads up AMATS for all intents and purposes, sit there, and he had meeting notes where they agreed that there were going to be separated pathways on both sides of this road. I mean, they agreed to that, and they'd already done preliminary engineering at that point. So the question is then why aren't they there? If it gets to a point, an engineering point, like where it's going to be a take of a household or something, or of a whole property as a result of that, I can understand that concern, but it would seem like we should already know that at that point in time. So their priority is moving traffic. They've said that point blank, and our priority is broader than that. Our agenda is definitely broader than that. So that's largely where the rub comes.
Madam Chair?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
I just want to concur with everything that Terry said. We met with them in July. We will meet with them again. I think it's really important that what I was trying to convey, and again today when I met with DOT, we're trying to convey that the plan that's coming out for the next 20 years to 2040 is really an infill plan. It's really about making Anchorage a great place, right? And as we do infill, we're going to be even further apart because it is a very different proposition. We're not expanding further and further out. We're not the valley. We're making the place better. Design is more important in the next 20 years for us because we want people to live, work, and play in the same area. So these amenities or necessities, depending on where you are going to become ever more important. So we've got to get that down, get that to the leadership of both organizations. That in Anchorage, it's actually, I think we need to convey it, that it pays an economic dividend back to Anchorage to put these things in place. And it's just hard. It's like we're talking different languages, I think, because we're becoming a more urban place. And as Terry said, they're throughput, and I get that. And Alaska's a huge state with a lot of needs. But here, we're not asking for everything. It's pretty basic stuff. So we'll continue that discussion. I want to rope you back into that, and I apologize if I haven't sent you an email about that, but I need to. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Well, postponing like we did tonight begins to send the message, if nothing else.
Right.
And I think that that's part of my reason for doing it. This was just sort of beyond what we've already encountered. It seems like at 3 or 4 other instances where we just so many things left unresolved and so many discussion points that just need to be really brought to the board in clarity. And so I think we'll have that opportunity in a couple of weeks.
It's a fine line with the types of conditions we put on their project, whether it goes forward or not.
Yep.
Clearly, the specific projects, I'm talking in general,
Yeah.
but the specific project is needed.
Right.
Something's got to happen. But
Yep.
if we put such conditions on it that they can't, it's financially infeasible, then, I don't necessarily want to kill the project, but I do want to have, something that's a little bit more, friendly to the neighborhood and people on bikes and walking and just in general.
Yep, I agree.
And the new pre-construction engineer is Jim Amundson, I'm pretty sure. And I'm pretty sure Jim Amundson knows the rules. What's that? And he's on the TAC. I completely forgot that. Thank you, sorry. Okay, is there any more discussion? Oh, we're all leaving. Can I get a motion to adjourn? And a second? Okay, thanks. We're adjourned. And it is, what time? 8:15.